So given the fact that our teachers are often doing workshops with our students and there are about 8 of them there, I just wondered, you've already started touching on some of the tools they can use and how they can encourage that interactivity. But I wonder, with small groups of 8, what other top tips have you got to really encourage that interactivity?
So I think when you've got towards 8 people, it's important to remember that then the way that you can do things is just slightly different. It's not a big thing, like you say, it's just over the 6 kind of criteria. I guess the 6, there's no evidence about it. It's just what I found personally. I think in terms of various different ways you can approach the session. So one of the key things that video conferencing allows you to do is obviously screen share. And that has a really important interaction in the way that you can do things. So you can share obviously any kind of information that you want to, and you can walk through that with your trainees and your students and that kind of stuff. So you can actively share what you want to show them. And that can be a really good way of getting engagement, because you're actually asking them to focus their attention on something else. When you are having just a video conference meeting or session where people are just talking, it's quite easy to zone in and zone out, particularly when the microphones are off and people know that they can't hear you. But then if you're actively asking them to pay attention to something, that's where you get a much better elements of engagement. So actually interspersing elements where you have to have the attendees attention on something, and using screen share on and off to do that is a really powerful way of trying to say to people, actually, I need you to focus your attention. And it just changes their mindset of how they're engaging with the meeting. So they've kind of gone from casually consuming the information to actively having to do something. And always follow that up with a question. That's the key thing. Have in that structure something that you're going to ask them to do as a result of the information they've just had to observe and stuff. So then that, again, that helps and reminds them to keep their attention on what's going on. Now, the way that you can further push that, now there are kind ways of doing that, and there's slightly less kind ways of doing that. So obviously the kind way is just say, stick it in the chat and answer your questions there. And again, that is a nicer way of doing it, because you're not picking on anyone in particular. Obviously, the more interesting way of doing that is selecting people from the group and say that this is going to be an interactive session. Again, it comes into that the pre-information and things, how you start the meeting. I'm actually going to be asking people to answer questions throughout. I'm just going to pick you random based on who's on my screen, and that is a really nice way of trying to make it random. So you can say the first one, I'm going to go for the top left. Next one, I'm going to go for top right. You don't have to specify how you're doing it, but it's a good way of saying to people that actually it's going to be completely random how I'm choosing people based on the screen. Because it's important to remember, every time you start and stop screen shares, all the platforms will reorganize people in terms of where they are on your screen. It never stays the same. So it is random. And therefore, that's a really nice way of trying to signpost to your trainees that actually I am just picking it on random.